Homage to Buddha Shakyamuni, homage to Manjushri, homage to all the lineage masters. Profound and subtle dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we can follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate all sentient beings, please generate unsurpassed bodhicitta. Next, let's continue and talk about the ground, path, and result within the Guhya Garbha Tantra. So speaking of the ground, path, and fruition of Tantrayana, we've already covered the ground part. When we talk about the path, it's much like the way we explain the Four Noble Truths in the Sutra tradition: suffering, origin, cessation, and the path. There is also a path, and it's essentially the same. Yesterday we discussed how there are classifications of 5 vehicles and also 9 vehicles. Within the 5 vehicles, Vajrayana is divided into outer tantras and inner tantras. Yesterday we touched upon the outer tantras, and actually they are quite different from the sutra tradition. In the sutras, although they determine that all phenomena are emptiness, when it comes to actual practice, how do we really meditate on this emptiness? They basically don't explain the specific methods. In the sutra tradition, there aren't any specific practices for meditating on deities. I've also searched through many sutra scriptures in the past. For example, they might mention visualizing Buddha Shakyamuni, praying in his presence, and focusing your mind and devotion toward him. By doing this, they say you'll receive blessings and accumulate merit, but they only go that far. As for what Buddha Shakyamuni actually looks like, his specific attributes, his form, and exactly how to visualize that form in many ways, these details remain hidden and are not clearly explained. But in the Tantric tradition, this is clearly explained. Yesterday we talked about Kriya Tantra, which is the most foundational level within the Vajrayana. In Kriya Tantra, you practice by viewing the deity and yourself as separate entities. At that stage, the deity is seen as the Supreme Lord, while you remain just an ordinary person. In this context, the deity is exceptionally sublime, while you don't feel sublime at all. Also, in certain Kriya Tantra teachings, they don't really go into detail about the Samaya being and the wisdom being. The idea is that you yourself are the Samaya being, while the deity you visualize in front of you is the wisdom being. With this approach in Kriya Tantra, there is a clear sense of superior and inferior between yourself and the deity. The deity is seen as perfect, and this is probably how many people visualize. Manjushri is so beautiful and majestic, while I am just someone with heavy karmic obstacles. I pray that the wisdom of Manjushri's enlightened body, speech, and mind will bless me, just like an alchemist's stone turning ordinary iron into gold. Generally speaking, the way many people think and practice is actually very similar to this first level, the Kriya Tantra. Today we'll begin discussing, as the previous view develops, the equality of oneself as the Samaya being and the deity as the wisdom being is seen to resemble the relationship between relatives or friends. In terms of view, compared to the Kriya Tantra we discussed yesterday, there is a real step forward here. It's a higher level. Why do we say this? It's because the way we practice is different, and also the view itself is different. It's like this. The wisdom being you visualize in front of you, like Manjushri or Avalokiteshvara, and your own body are now seen as equals. There is no high or low between you. It's like the relationship between siblings or friends. With siblings, you might be the younger brother and I might be the older brother. Between the two of us, there's no sense of better or worse. We stand on equal footing. Whether talking or doing anything, we're equal. It's the same with friends. Generally, they're equal. So, when it comes to visualizing the deity, you are Manjushri, and I'm equal to this visualization, because at the deepest level, we're inseparable. There's no real difference between us. It's just that in the way we practice and in how things appear in the relative world, there are differences. But in truth, we're the same. For example, let's say I'm a monk and my older brother is a layperson. On the surface, maybe lay people show a bit of respect toward monks, but deep down he's thinking, we're family. So in this practice, when we talk about the ultimate level, you recognize yourself and the deity as one essence, and yes, on the relative level, there might be some apparent differences. Essentially, it's a relationship based on equality, like siblings or friends. At this stage, you genuinely feel that there's truly no separation between yourself and the deity. That's the view here. Now, you might wonder, doesn't this lead to arrogance? No, it doesn't. When you really examine this with wisdom, you see that your essential nature and the deity's essential nature are completely inseparable. There's no higher or lower. So this is what we mean by inseparability. This describes the relationship between you and the deity. So once you have this view in mind, to then practice conduct consistent with Kriya and meditation consistent with Yoga Tantra, things like cleaning and keeping your surroundings tidy, in these aspects it's similar to what we do in Kriya Tantra. But in Upatantra, there's a real focus on what's happening in your mind, as well as on how you use your body and your speech. And through this approach, after 7 human lifetimes, the 4 families of the Buddhas will be accomplished. The 4 families refer to body, speech, mind, and the quality family. Actually, there's not much real difference here. It's just that different tantric texts have their own ways of explaining things. Yesterday, we mentioned that in Kriya Tantra, you accomplish the result within 16 lifetimes, while in Upatantra, accomplishment happens within 7 lifetimes. These are the assertions of Upatantra, also known as the vehicle combining both tantras. Next, moreover, as certainty in the union of the 2 truths increases, oneself and the deity become inseparable, like water poured into water. Here we're talking about the union of the 2 truths, ultimate truth and relative truth, or we could say the union of appearance and emptiness. You develop certainty that these 2 are inseparable, and you can practice accordingly. This view is quite different from what we discussed before. Earlier we said that the 2 of us are equal, but in terms of appearance it was like me and my friend or me and my brother. There's still some sense of you and me and how things appear. But ultimately when we analyze deeply, we realize we're equal, of one taste. When we really investigate, we find this oneness. But here in Yoga Tantra, it's different. So in the typical Yoga Tantra practice, you begin by inviting the deity from the Dharma Dhatu to dissolve into your own body. And when the deity dissolves into you, you and the deity become completely inseparable. In many Yoga Tantra practices and liturgies, you'll find this approach. The deity becomes inseparable from your own mind. And then after a while, you use certain verses and prayers to request the wisdom deity to return to the pure realm. So in the middle part, when the deity has dissolved into you, you make offerings, pray, praise, recite mantras. And after you've completed the activities and the ritual, you request the deity to return to the Pure Land. You can find practices like this. For instance, in the Medicine Buddha liturgy within Tibetan Buddhism, this is what we call the view of inseparability. If you're really going to practice Vajrayana, you need to understand these views. If you don't even know this much, well, you're really not getting it at all. These days, many people who claim to practice Vajrayana just recite a mantra or say they've received some empowerment. When I visited Hong Kong, I saw this happening in many places. Not just in Tantra, even basic sutra teachings are seriously lacking. For many, faith has basically just become a matter of ritual. It's a bit like in Thailand. You see many lay practitioners there, but overall, the depth of Buddhist understanding isn't really there. The atmosphere for practicing Buddhism is wonderful, but the foundation in study and contemplation isn't very strong. So I feel that for many people today, whether you are doing rituals, recitations, or meditation, you really need to have a proper understanding of what you're doing. This is what we call the view of Yoga Tantra. Consistent with that view, and without relying upon external activities, this inseparability is accomplished solely through internal practice. At this point in Yoga Tantra, you don't place as much emphasis on external activities like prostrations and so forth. These external things aren't the main focus. The main emphasis is on internal practice. Because you and the deity are inseparable, you meditate with this understanding. By meditating and sealing with the 4 seals of Buddha's enlightened body, speech, mind, and deeds. So in this practice, you view all phenomena as the Buddha's body, all sounds as the Buddha's Vajra speech, all thoughts as the Buddha's wisdom, and all activities as the Buddha's enlightened activity. This is called the 4 seals. You practice by holding these 4 seals. When you're practicing some liturgies, you're constantly training in pure perception. I no longer see the world as just a place of pain and sorrow, or as something chaotic and restless. It's not like that at all. In the words of my perfect teacher, when we first set our motivation, there are 2 ways to do it. One is to generate bodhicitta according to the sutra tradition. The other is based on the profound Vajrayana tradition. And when we say profound Vajrayana tradition, we are really talking about Yoga Tantra and above. At that level, when you listen to the teachings, you visualize the place as being completely pure. You see the teacher as pure, your Dharma friends as pure. Everything is pure. In this way, your body, speech, mind, and activities are all seen as the Buddha's pure mandala. There are no exceptions. This is how you should meditate. Actually, as it says in the Beacon of Certainty, this practice isn't about taking something inherently dirty and forcing yourself to see it as pure. In our ordinary conceptual mind, we think, oh, this is a sentient being, that's a Buddha. Buddhas are complete in all qualities, while sentient beings are full of afflictions. But that's just talking about appearances. But on the level of true reality, all those pure qualities of Buddhahood are already fully present in the true nature of sentient beings right now. It's really just like the difference between water and ice. Same essence, different form. So in many causal vehicle teachings, the sutra tradition, including texts like the Ten Bhumis Sutra, you'll even find passages where bodhisattvas prostrate to sentient beings. Why would they do that? Because they're bowing to the cause that will eventually become a bodhisattva. Think about it. If the result weren't already present in some way within the cause, then the result would somehow arise from absolutely nothing. A barley seed and the barley plant, they hold the same essential value. So in Vajrayana, when we say all sentient beings possess Buddha nature, the sutra tradition usually goes only as far as saying all beings have the potential or the qualities of Buddha nature. But as to whether the essence of our Buddha nature is one taste with the Buddha's own essence, that's something they've hardly explored at all. And here's another key point. Vajrayana directly takes the result and uses it as the path. The sutra tradition, they explain the theory beautifully, but when it comes to actually taking the primordial purity and emptiness of reality and transforming that into an actual practice, they don't really show you how. So, when we talk about the superiority of Vajrayana, we aren't just bragging. You should be able to see the logic here, especially if you have sharp faculties. This will make perfect sense. I've mentioned this before when talking with intellectuals. Generally, people who criticize Tantra fall into two groups. First, there are those who simply don't understand it. They lack the knowledge. And the second group are those who simply lack the wisdom to see it. Why do I say that? Well, when it comes to Vajrayana's profound teachings on purity and equality, they've literally never even heard these concepts explained, let alone understood them. Plus, they haven't investigated for themselves. They just repeat what others say, going with the crowd. So sometimes I really think those of us studying Vajrayana need to examine things carefully from every angle. After 3 lifetimes, one will awaken as the nature of the 5 families. Earlier we spoke of 7 lifetimes, here it's down to 3 lifetimes. These are the assertions of the vehicle of Yoga Tantra, even in the 3 classes of the outer Tantras by taking the path of the perfection of purity as the result. The intrinsic nature of kayas and wisdom will appear as the characteristics of deities and mantras. As I just explained, the ultimate pure kayas and wisdom of Buddhahood already exist right now in the form of the deities. And these deity forms, some arise through meditative absorption, others through visualization, and some through mantra recitation. These are the methods we use to take the result as the path. By directly engaging in the deeds of the Buddhas in whatever way possible, now you won't find anything like this in the sutra tradition, where you can take the pure kayas and wisdom of all phenomena and bring them into your path to varying degrees. Let's say I have the wisdom level of Yoga Tantra. If I have the wisdom of Yoga Tantra, I use that inseparability to take the result as the path. Or if I'm not quite there yet and have more of an Upatantra level of wisdom, I might view the deity and myself as friends or siblings. That's how I use it as the path. Even at a level just slightly above the sutras, I would visualize the deity in front of me while seeing myself as inferior, confessing and practicing in their presence. So you really won't find these approaches in the sutra tradition. The result becomes the path. We also call Vajrayana the resultant vehicle, while the sutra path is the causal vehicle. Why? Because sentient beings will eventually become Buddhas, and sutra emphasizes determining this from the causal side. But in Vajrayana, you takes the fruition that sentient beings will one day achieve and directly uses it as the path right now. That's why we call it the resultant vehicle. Based on this, these methods are proved to be swifter and more sublime than those on the path of sutra. So when we examine and compare from this angle, what can we establish? What conclusion can we draw? When we compare Sutrayana and Vajrayana, Vajrayana has far more skillful methods available. Things like direct introduction to the nature of mind, visualizing deities, generation stage, completion stage, and so on. There are so many of these superior practices, and honestly, there are many swift methods. Achieving results happens much more quickly. I can honestly say I've experienced this myself. For example, you see people who study at Buddhist Academy in the Sutra tradition for many years, yet their character or mindset barely changes at all. But then they start practicing Vajrayana, and within just a few years, they truly become completely different people. This is one of Vajrayana's superior qualities. Now, I'm not talking about actually achieving the fruition of Buddhahood or Bodhisattvahood, but on the path of practice itself, the methods of Sutrayana and Vajrayana are really different. And I can say this without any exaggeration. Speaking from my own personal experience, it's something I've realized from my own practice and experience. This feeling in Vajrayana is truly completely different. So I hope you'll look into this for yourself, using your own faith, but also staying completely fair and objective. Of course, these kinds of statements throughout Tibetan history, schools like Gelug, Sakya, and Nyingma, there have been some debates and disagreements. And nowadays, many Buddhists are afraid to say that Buddhism is uniquely profound. Instead, they just say, all religions are wonderful. Sometimes when I'm in certain special situations, I feel like I have to say, well, when it comes to doing good deeds, Buddhism is the same as all other religions. But I don't dare say all religions are wonderful, because some religions do involve quite a lot of killing. So depending on the environment and who you're talking to, you end up coming across as a bit hypocritical. You just can't help it. But honestly, if I were to describe just how extraordinary Vajrayana really is, I'm afraid many people wouldn't be willing to accept it. However, in front of genuine Buddhist practitioners, I'm really not afraid to say this. And the reason I'm not afraid isn't because I'm saying other paths can't lead to realization, but rather there truly are these sublime, skillful means and instructions. If we sit down and go through the text together, as long as we have enough time and the other person is being fair and stays objective, they'll see it. It's not that difficult. So when we say Vajrayana is superior, we're talking about many concrete areas where it truly surpasses the sutra tradition. Second, for the unsurpassed vehicle of inner mantra, Mahayoga, one meditates on the two profound stages according to the view that the deity and practitioner are primordially beyond meeting and parting, and that phenomenal existence is purity and evenness. Now we come to unsurpassed yoga, and what we call the unsurpassed secret vehicle, Mahayoga, Anuyoga, and Atiyoga. And this is on a whole different level from what we've discussed so far. Because here the text says it as clearly as possible. You and the deity have always been inseparable, pure, and equal. It directly reveals this profound view. Earlier this was kept more hidden. Take Madhyamaka, for example. They say ultimately everything is empty, and relatively speaking, things do appear. They only emphasize that emptiness when talking about the ultimate level. This is basically the Madhyamaka Svatantrika approach. But here, it's more like Madhyamaka Prasangika view. As Chandrakirti explains in Entering the Middle Way, when you apply this reasoning to conventional reality, you find that even appearance has no true arising. So here's the key point. Right now, as I appear as the wisdom deity appears, we are already pure and equal. There is no difference whatsoever. Notice, it doesn't say eventually or in the end, the deity and I will become the same. It doesn't say that at all. Think of it like this: right as I'm appearing, right as the deity is appearing. It's like two different colored images in the same mirror. There's no difference between them. We recognize this purity right here and now. This view is really quite high. One meditates on the two profound stages. Once you have this view to guide you, you move into the deep practices of the generation and completion stages, with conduct free from acceptance or rejection. In terms of conduct, there's no more acceptance or rejection. Why are many practices in unsurpassed Vajrayana so unconventional? Take the 5 meats and 5 nectars, for example. While beef and pork taste delicious, so we happily eat those. If you put a piece of human meat next to a piece of pork, you'd label one dirty and the other clean. But conventionally, there's actually no difference. Both are just meat, no difference. And when you look at their essential nature, the difference disappears entirely. Both are empty and both are equally pure. But when people's conceptual thinking gets mixed up with cultural habits, we get stuck with all these ideas about what's clean and what's dirty. In this view, all of that gets completely shattered. So in Vajrayana, those who truly understand this view no longer feel the need to cling to one thing or reject another in their conduct. Whatever appears as the manifestation of the pure nature of phenomena is enjoyed. It is asserted that in that lifetime one will accomplish the nature of the four kayas and the five wisdoms, the path of the unity of no further learning as the state of the sixth family, great Vajradhara. Notice it says in that lifetime. Unsurpassed yoga talks about achieving realization and Buddhahood in this very life. The Dharmakaya state, where all five Buddha families are inseparable, that's what we call the sixth Vajradhara. Nowadays, lots of people call themselves the sixth Vajradhara or Dorje Chang. Please, I really hope you'll all use your wisdom to think about it. Yesterday, a nun told me, I'm just so devoted to that Dorje Chang. But when I saw some of what's actually happening, I really need to warn you. These days there are people waving all kinds of flags. This Vajrayana master, that Vajrayana master. They claim certain Tibetan teachers have recognized them, but who knows what they've actually written in those recognition letters. Khenpo Tsultrim Lodro and I have actually checked with those teachers, and many said they never authenticated any of it. Yet these people keep claiming they are the sixth Vajradhara, and that their followers are the five Buddha families. All sorts of claims like that. So if you don't understand even basic Vajrayana principles, you're in trouble. To be honest, looking at some of the students here, on the surface, they seem to have no wisdom, no sense about these things. They keep saying things like, I have such strong faith in him. It's all about following the person instead of the Dharma. People can put on all kinds of shows. Maybe they really are manifestations of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, but what shows on the surface is clearly not in accord with the Dharma. And if it's not in line with the Dharma, then it's my job to warn you about it. Sometimes people don't care about genuine Dharma. Instead, they chase after all sorts of things, especially in places like Hong Kong and Taiwan. When you check online, you see things claiming to be Tibetan Buddhism that have absolutely nothing to do with it. In genuine Tibetan Vajrayana, everything is pure. The rituals, the stages, it all follows a very strict and clear order. Don't we understand this? In Tibetan Buddhism, there are only the five major schools, Gelug, Sakya, Jonang, and so on. All the lineage masters from these five schools basically follow the same standards of conduct. I've visited many monasteries myself, but I see many Han disciples being incredibly superstitious, chasing after things blindly. Even here at Larunga, we've always had lots of star chasers. Now look, I'm not telling you who you can or can't follow. You can rely on anyone, as long as it's reasonable. But honestly, Larunga is so packed right now that there's just no room left. With so many people, we'll need to find ways to reduce the numbers. I've been thinking about how to handle this lately. Honestly, fewer people would be better. But if you do go elsewhere, please rely on teachers who are publicly recognized and truly in accord with the Dharma. This is very important. About getting to know a teacher, the 50 verses on the Guru says you should observe them for 12 years. Tsongkhapa also talked about this, 12 years or at least 6. But for us, we don't need 6 years, 6 days, not even 6 hours. All we need is to hear a name and, wow, I feel such a connection. Must be karma from past lives. The nuns here are especially prone to this, though some monks fall into it too. Last year, a few students here earned their degrees. They stood right in front of me and vowed they'd stay for 3 years. Not even 18 months later, one of them left Larangar. Yesterday, he showed up with some lay followers, all full of himself. I've taken over a monastery. I told him, is that really such a big deal? It's just an old run-down temple. The point is, you can't even keep a simple vow. When someone is still that restless, it's honestly not something we should be encouraging. Anyway, let's move on. From among the 3 stages, generation, completion, and the great perfection, we just talked about how unsurpassed mantra has 3 main approaches. Now let's go through each one. First, those practicing Mahayoga assert that resultant genuine truth includes the 5 qualities of enlightened body, speech, mind, qualities, and activities, the wisdom of genuine truth, and the basic space of genuine truth. So what exactly is Mahayoga? These points are crucial. You really need to get this. We keep running into different explanations within unsurpassed secret teachings. So let me clarify. What's Mahayoga's view? These three, called the seven wealths of genuine truth, are naturally spontaneously present and primordially free from meeting and parting. Think of it this way. Mahayoga uses concepts similar to Madhyamaka's ultimate and relative truth. You could call them two truths. So what's this ultimate truth all about? The view is this. At their very core, all phenomena are inseparable from the Buddha's body, speech, mind, qualities, and activities. We call this resultant ultimate truth, or you could say general ultimate truth, the big picture. Right now, deep within every single being's mind stream, all of Buddha's qualities already exist in their essence. When we finally become Buddhas, these will fully reveal themselves. That's what we mean by primordial wisdom, ultimate truth. Now, for sentient beings at our current level, these qualities haven't manifested yet. This is the primordial wisdom, ultimate truth of the five wisdoms. Then there's ultimate truth of Dharmadhatu, the reality of the Dharmadhatu as perceived by wisdom, or you could think of it as the emptiness aspect of Tathagata wisdom. But here's the key. These three wisdoms, these three ultimate truths, they have never actually been separate. They've always been complete from the very beginning, free from meeting and parting. This is the seven wealths of genuine truth. So you can see Mahayoga's perspectives really do go beyond the sutra teachings. Their understanding of ultimate truth is completely different. And why is that? Why is Vajrayana different from Sutrayana? In the sutra tradition, they certainly make the point that everything is empty. But once they get to that emptiness, they don't take the analysis any further. But as we discussed before, Buddha nature is actually inherently full of wisdom. You could say the second turning, the Madhyamaka teachings in sutra, just presents a blank void. They don't explain how it's possible for beings to possess this Buddha nature, or how this Buddha nature exists perfectly intact in every being's mind stream right now. You just won't find this explained in the sutra tradition. Think about it. Why would Buddha nature's qualities suddenly appear when we become Buddhas? The sutras don't really have an answer for that, but Mahayoga does. Mahayoga doesn't just accept that everything is empty. It goes a step further. It recognizes the Buddha's body, speech, mind, and so on as the resultant ultimate truth. Then you add the ultimate truth of primordial wisdom and the ultimate truth of Dharmadhatu. All three exist in spontaneous presence. Now, in sutra teachings, they often call this Buddha nature. In definitive texts like the Uttara Tantra, they frequently use the term ultimate truth. So it gets confusing. Sometimes Buddha nature gets called ultimate truth. Sometimes ultimate truth refers to emptiness, and other times it refers to Buddha nature. In the sutra teachings, this is only mentioned in passing. It's all a bit vague. Mipham Rinpoche explains in his other teachings that terms like Buddha nature, union of appearance and emptiness, wisdom drop, dharmadhatu, and suchness, these are all just different names for the same reality. But why Buddha nature is empty, this isn't really explained. This is what we call the seven wealths of ultimate truth. In summary, surpassing genuine truth means basic space adorned by kayas and wisdom as emptiness that possesses all supreme qualities at the time of the result. The Dharmadhatu adorned with kayas and wisdom that we have right now is actually the supreme emptiness that possesses all supreme qualities at the time of the result. This is the surpassing ultimate truth that the sutra tradition never even mentions. Even though this dynamic energy appears as the entire universe and its inhabitants, it intrinsically, in Vajrayana, everything we see right now, all these appearances are displays of the kayas and wisdom. It's like when you dream, dreams are just different displays of your consciousness at that moment. So why do we experience all these different appearances? They're actually displays of wisdom. Beings just don't recognize them as such. That this wisdom, like magic, has no true inherent existence is surpassing relative truth. Relative truth in Vajrayana is also different from sutra. The sutra tradition says ultimate truth is emptiness, as taught in the root stanzas on the middle way, free from the four extremes and 8 elaborations. And what about relative truth? According to Madhyamaka Prasangika, relative truth is dreamlike, illusory, like mirages and bubbles. That's how they explain it. But they never mention that there is a pure side to this relative world. They don't explain that if you examine the relative properly, you can actually discover something extraordinary. within these everyday appearances. That's just not in their teachings. So when you compare Sutrayana and Vajrayana, just looking at Mahayoga's view alone, Vajrayana explains so many inherent qualities that the sutras never even touch upon. Look at ultimate truth. It has these distinct characteristics of the seven wealths. And what about relative truth? Here it's illusion-like primordial wisdom that does not truly exist. But this illusion-like primordial wisdom, as we just discussed, means the entire universe and its inhabitants abide within kayas and wisdom within purity. So why does understanding the relative nature in this way help us truly connect with the deity in our practice? It's because that purity is already there, inherently. Appearance and emptiness abide within each of the two truths, free from meeting and parting. Ultimate truth has this inseparable quality of appearance and emptiness, and so does relative truth. Now, some of you might be wondering, if both relative truth and ultimate truth have appearance and emptiness, aren't they exactly the same then? No, they're different, because ultimate truth, ordinary people like us can't see it at all. You could say it's like the self-appearing reality of Sambhogakaya Buddhas. The relative truth we see now, some masters use an analogy. It's like the moon in the sky versus the moon reflected in water. For people who only see the moon's reflection, they have no idea there's a moon in the sky. The true ultimate truth, this realm where purity and emptiness wisdom are inseparable. We ordinary people can't touch it, can't know it. But within the relative, this aspect where appearance and emptiness are inseparable, through practice, as your obscurations and karma gradually purify, it can reveal itself. And indirectly, this helps you break through to the deeper wisdom of ultimate truth. That's one way to put it. So here, this surpasses the two truths of the common approach based on the aspect of the purity of kayas. To be honest, the Guhyagarbha Tantra is incredibly deep. Some of you have been saying, every bit of this is so profound, I can't find a single easy part. I think you're right. If you don't have the authentic Vajrayana commentaries to guide you, you'll be lost. After all, this isn't like picking up a novel or a newspaper. With novels and newspapers, you don't need to spend this much time on just a tiny bit of content. In actuality, both the relative that appears at the time of the ground and path and the genuine that appears at the time of the final result are the inseparable nature of ground and result as the great Dharmakaya of surpassing inseparable truth. So in true reality, whether it's relative truth or ultimate truth, all these relative appearances at the ground and path stages will eventually transform into the pure, ultimate truth at the fruition stage. As I mentioned earlier, our current relative reality appears to have aspects of both purity and emptiness, and the ultimate reality has them too. But the ultimate is different. It's the very nature of the great Dharmakaya. That's something we haven't realized at all yet. We just have this luminosity and emptiness we can perceive, but in its nature, there's this underlying quality, that seed of the Dharmakaya is already there. If that seed weren't there, then everything we see would be fake, with no reality to it at all, but that wouldn't make any sense. Briefly stated, the basic space within which the appearances of kayas and wisdom unite is the union of appearances and emptiness. In order for the strength of meditation that is complementary with this to reach perfection, the paths of the four Vidyadharas are traversed through the practice of the three samadhis, together with their branches. It is asserted that awakening manifests on the ground of the great assembly of the Wheel of Syllables. In many Mahayoga and unsurpassed Tantra practices, we use the three samadhis, the samadhi of suchness, the samadhi of total illumination, and the causal samadhi. The first is the samadhi of suchness. This is where you see that everything is emptiness. In many ritual texts, you'll see phrases like out of emptiness or from the state of emptiness. It's all about emptiness, starting by realizing that all things are empty. This is the samadhi of suchness. Then you think of all the beings who suffer because they don't realize this emptiness, and you generate compassion for them. This is the samadhi of total illumination. The causal samadhi has different levels of visualization, both subtle and coarse. The subtle method involves visualizing the deity emerging from a seed syllable. The coarser method is to visualize the deity directly. In an instant, you see the full form of Vajrasattva, Amitabha, or Manjushri. This is the causal samadhi. These three samadhis are practiced through various methods: prayers, visualizations, praises, and other yogas. We'll cover the four Vidyadharas in detail later. According to omniscient Longchenpa, there are four great Vidyadharas: the matured Vidyadhara, the life mastery Vidyadhara, the Mahamudra Vidyadhara, and the spontaneous Vidyadhara. These four Vidyadhara levels span everything from the path of preparation all the way to Buddhahood. It's similar to the stages in the Hinayana tradition, like the stream enterer, the once returner, the non-returner, and so on. In the Mahayana, there are the 5 paths and 10 bhumis, starting from the first bhumi all the way to the 10th, and finally Buddhahood. Similarly, in Vajrayana, we progress from the matured Vidyadhara level to the spontaneous Vidyadhara. These are its unique levels of realization. So different teachings have different names for their levels of realization. And what do you ultimately manifest? The ground of the great assembly of the Wheel of Syllables. This means manifesting Buddhahood. Each tradition has its own terminology. Second, Anuyoga asserts that the intrinsic nature mandala of the ground arises by striking the key points of the inner Vajra body of channels, winds, and vital essences without relying upon the paths of external elaboration and effort. Now, Anuyoga is a bit different from Mahayoga. The sutra teachings also say everything is created by the mind. By actually practicing with channels, winds, and vital essences, you can gain mastery over your mind. So through this practice, the ground mandala can manifest. This nature is the basic space of emptiness as the mandala of Kuntuzangmo. As we discussed earlier, realizing the entire Dharmadhatu as emptiness is what we call the mandala of Kuntuzangmo, and the method of bliss as the mandala of Kuntuzangpo. Their inseparable air is the bodhicitta mandala of exaltation. This is the view. Generally speaking, this part of Anuyoga is essential. It's about appearance, emptiness, and their inseparability. From this perspective, the many union forms in Vajrayana are not ordinary male and female images from the mundane world. Appearance, emptiness, and their union, each element has its own symbolic meaning. It's like how in worldly terms we talk about yin, yang, and their union. For any functioning system in the relative world, yin and yang need to unite for things to operate properly. Vajrayana uses these forms to represent these deeper truths. This is the view of the inseparability of appearance and emptiness, where every appearance is seen as pure, and that very purity is realized as empty. As the sovereign of all families and mandalas, to know this is the view of inseparable bliss and emptiness. Congruent with this, by emphasizing the path of wisdom exaltation that involves practicing with one's body alone and in consort with the body of another, thereby perfecting the 5 paths, the union of no further learning will be accomplished. That's Anuyoga. Now for Ati-yoga, Ati-yoga's practice method is quite profound. Ati-yoga asserts that the fundamental nature is primordially awakened self-awareness, and that within this nature of inseparable original purity and intrinsic spontaneous presence, the appearances of compassion unceasingly manifest as the 3 indwelling kayas. Actually, this is quite simple if you explain it in the following way. When the fundamental nature of self-aware mind is empty and pure, the 5 wisdoms of spontaneous presence are naturally complete. Emptiness and wisdom are inseparable. These correspond to the 3 kayas. Emptiness is the Dharmakaya, the unceasing luminosity is Sambhogakaya, and the inseparability of the 2 is the Nirmanakaya. The 3 kayas are best understood as explained in Dzogchen. To explain it this way, it becomes crystal clear. Otherwise, many people think the 3 kayas mean one person somehow has 3 separate bodies. They get all sorts of confused ideas. This is simply because they lack the pith instructions of Vajrayana. I see nowadays so many Dharma teachers and graduate students in Sutra traditions struggling so hard, spending all their time researching the 3 kayas, yet never truly understanding what they are. They look at the 3 kayas and try to intellectualize it. Okay, Dharmakaya. What's its relationship with Sambhogakaya? What are their functions? They try to figure it all out with their conceptual minds. Day after day, they work through diagrams and PowerPoint slides, but it's very difficult to gain any real realization that way. When I look at how people study Buddhism today, including in universities, it has become purely textual. Who wrote this book? What are the 6 paramitas? What's the definition of prajna paramita? Once they can answer all that, they think, now I'm a Buddhist studies scholar. But without any actual realization, the truly profound teachings of Buddhism remain impossibly difficult to grasp. Without actual practice or personal experience, if you only have theory, like knowing who wrote a certain treatise, that's not the way to truly understand the Dharma. Anyway, moving on. These 3 yogas are actually explained in detail in Longchenpa's Precious Treasury of the Dharmadhatu. He explains that the other 8 vehicles aren't truly ultimate, only Ati Yoga is supreme. Longchenpa himself mentions this in his other works, such as the Treasury of the Supreme Vehicle, Treasury of the Luminosity, and Treasury of the Philosophical Systems. He presents things somewhat differently in each. In these treasuries, including the Treasury of the Dharmadhatu, Longchenpa has already thoroughly explained why Dzogchen is so profoundly excellent. He quotes from the Liberation Through Wearing Soul Air of the Doctrine Tantra. After studying these, you will realize that you truly must practice Dzogchen directly, or at least study it. It is the pinnacle of all vehicles, the summit of all paths. Now, some people who aren't proper vessels, who get caught up in conceptual analysis, might not accept this, but not accepting it doesn't change anything. Actually, this is established through scriptural reasoning and logic, and it's proven by the experience and realization of countless masters. So I really hope that in the future I try my best, though I don't know how much longer I'll live. But my faith in the Tantric teachings is so strong. And as I get older, my confidence in the Tantric teachings just grows stronger and stronger. I've translated some really precious Tantric teachings. Some of these I've made public, and some I haven't yet. These include parts of Longchenpa's 7 treasuries, with emphasis on the pith instructions. When there's a chance in the future, I hope you can look into them with your own faith and wisdom. In a big crowd, it's hard to really take it all in. I used to have a hard time following along when my own teacher was lecturing. I'd get restless and feel like the teacher was just rambling on and on. But later on, when I look back at what the teacher said, I would realize, oh, this is actually so simple. So you might not fully get everything while I'm talking, but if you study it later on your own while praying to the lineage masters, the effect might actually be even better. That's how it works. Now continuing. The view of innate empty awareness is naturally luminous and free from activity without the need to remove or add anything or to be dependent upon exertion through methods such as visualization, binding the winds, and the rest. You don't need the generation stage of Mahayoga, which relies on visualization, nor the completion stage of Anuyoga that involves complex wind practices. You can skip all those elaborate methods. The view of Ati Yoga is actually very straightforward. You don't need generation stage or completion stage or any of those complicated practices. You just look directly at your mind's nature. No adding, no removing, right here and now. It's just like what's taught in Finding Comfort and Ease in the Nature of Mind. The other day, Khenpo Sultrim Lodro and I were talking about whether to include that text in our future curriculum. He said, oh, that's way too deep. Maybe not. I've been thinking about it too, because some of those verses directly explain how the nature of mind is actually Buddhahood. These points are indeed very profound, so teaching them isn't easy either. Congruent with that, by practicing the 4 modes of placement of Trekcho and the 4 luminosities of Togul, the path of the 4 visions is perfected and liberation occurs in the sole original space of spontaneous presence. This is the practice method of Dzogchen. The actual practice is taught in the Great Perfection Manjushri. Here we're focusing on the theory. The Guhyagarbha Tantra is actually quite condensed. It's brief and written in a pith instruction style rather than an expansive one. If you want a more detailed explanation, you can look at Finding Comfort and Ease in the Nature of Mind, as well as the works in the 7 treasuries. The Yeshe Lama goes into even greater detail. Anyway, we'll see about those in the future. The above explains the 5 enumerations of vehicles along with their inner divisions. To summarize their philosophies, there are 5. Next, we will look at how these 5 vehicles correspond to the different philosophical systems. First, the correct philosophy of the world asserts that the result of karmic ripening is never wasted. Cause and effect is unfailing. This is crucial. For anyone studying Vajrayana, if you don't accept unfailing cause and effect or past and future lives, there's no way you can practice Vajrayana. That's the first philosophy. Second, the philosophy of the vehicle of characteristics asserts that all outer and inner phenomena created through duality arise interdependently by mistaken apprehension through delusion. Designations, such as the individual person and so forth, occur. Delusion can be reversed, and nirvana will be actualized by realizing the selflessness of the person or the non-existence of apprehending and grasping at an external object, and also the non-existence of a fixating mind. Because of inner and outer dependent origination and confused delusion, we grasp at I and mine, just as entering the middle way explains. The latter part describes selflessness of phenomena, the former selflessness of persons. Concerning this, from the standpoint of the varied degrees of realization, there are the three schools of the hearers, mind only and middle way. Madhyamaka fully realizes both selflessness of person and phenomena, while schools of the hearers, mind only, haven't completely realized selflessness. To break it down based on what we just mentioned, realizing only the selflessness of person is the hearer school. The mind-only school realizes that external objects don't exist, but they still hold the inner self-aware mind as real and haven't realized its emptiness. Going beyond that is Madhyamaka. This second is the vehicle of characteristics, what we'd call sutra here. Mipham Rinpoche's writing is truly excellent. The language is so concise, but all the most crucial points are completely summarized. I've always felt this way. You could read dozens of books by other authors, but reading one of Mipham Rinpoche's works is enough to make everything click. Like his commentary on the ornament of the middle way, and all the tough questions in Madhyamaka are answered there. Once you finish that one text, you feel like you've truly got a grip on the whole subject. Moreover, the philosophies of the three outer classes of Tantra teach that these interdependent, confused perceptions arise due to the undeceiving law of cause and result. If one relies upon the various methods of deity and mantra, there will be swift release from confusion. And it is taught that the karmic results of samsara will no longer leave a sullying effect. Conventionally, karmic results manifest in all sorts of unfailing ways. Sutra teachings don't really go into this, but in the outer tantras, we see that all things arise from causes and conditions. To cut through those afflictions and conditions, you rely on deity practice and mantra recitation as your method. So, both Vajrayana and Sutra practitioners recite mantras, but in Sutra they just say, recite the Shurangama mantra or the Amitabha mantra. As for why reciting a mantra actually cuts through afflictions, they never explain that part. Many people say a Buddha's name and a mantra are the same thing, but the reason why they are the same is never explained in sutra teachings. So in the Guhyagarbha Tantra, when we get to the final section on mantra principles, it will explain how mantra and deity are actually one and inseparable. The outer three tantras cut through afflictions through special practice methods. This is the third philosophy, the outer three tantras. Fourth, the general philosophy of unsurpassed Yoga Tantra teaches that if through training on the path one realizes that suffering itself is awakened and passions themselves are the great wisdom of perfect liberation, there will be no effect from karmic results. This is somewhat like what certain Zen schools say. They say the words, but they don't always give you the specific skillful means to get there. In Chinese Zen school and even in Mahamudra teachings, they definitely mention these high-level views, but the actual technical instructions are really preserved in Vajrayana. For instance, in the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, it says, afflictions are themselves awakening, but why afflictions are awakening isn't explained in great detail. In Unsurpassed Yoga Tantra, it says afflictions themselves are liberation, suffering itself is awakening. It explains the actual principle. Through this method, you can stay unstained by worldly karma and afflictions. That's the way of Mahayoga and Anuyoga. From another perspective, since the phenomena of samsara and enlightenment are primordially and spontaneously present as great purity and evenness, without needing to rely upon the efforts of the path, whether it's the generation stage, completion stage, or mantra recitation, according to the highest view of authentic Dzogchen, when you reach the main practice, you don't need mantras or prostrations. Of course, that's only after the preliminaries. If you haven't finished your 100,000 prostrations, you're still not ready to even hear these Dzogchen teachings. It is revealed that primordially there has never been an effect from the bondage of karmic causes and results. This is the fully perfected philosophy of the Great Perfection, which is the absolute result of all paths. Regarding this, the root Tantra states, even all of this, the apprehended, and so it is. Although Rongzompa and Longchenpa each interpret these root verses differently, here I have explained the crucial points that are agreed upon. That's all for today. Thank you, everyone.
Bandara Banma Sodargye